Welcome to Thoughtspeak, the original Animorphs podcast dedicated to K.A. Applegate's sci-fi classic. I'm your host, Michelle.
And I'm Coleman.
And we're back at you with another Thoughtspeak, and so excited, I must say, to be bringing you the end of the series, the countdown. We are officially in the last 6 books of the series. There are 5 more after this. Holy crap, folks. It's a Code Brown.
Worth pointing out, though, that one of those is the Olympus Chronicles, which is, it's a pretty hefty read. All the Chronicle books are a little bigger than normal, but it, definitely one of the ones that breezes by because it's incredible. Spoilers for my future review.
It's going to be very difficult to, go forward. Harsh criticism, given how much I love the end of the series here.
I'm trying. I mean, especially these books I haven't read before, but it would help if they would stop completely blowing my mind at how, I didn't see them being this good in the ones I haven't read.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? One thing I wanted to mention quick while it's on my mind is that I didn't realize we already had the final Rachel book in the series, and we already had the Tobias book in the series. This one is the last Cassie book. And I think it really, so far, it might be the best character set of the series.
Well, it's worth saying real quick. We'll get into how this works as the last Cassie book. But how do you feel the Rachel and Tobias books worked as the last book in their arc?
So that's the thing, as I was looking at those and thinking about that before this review, and I was pretty disappointed, right, with the David return and that kind of being...
Well, I think the plot is not as serious as some of these other final books. Obviously, it's definitely that more, Marvel Cosmos storyline, dealing with the Olympus and Krayak and all that. But I feel like Rachel's arc, specifically in that book, having to deal with David coming back and who she is, what kind of warrior she is, if she still kind of has her humanity or if she's just a full-fledged does what it takes to end the war. I thought it touched on that very well. So for her last Rachel book, I thought it kind of completed her arc somewhat.
It will come back into play with her, ending,
her real
certainly.
Ending.
So it's setting it up well. And Tobias, the previous book that we just reviewed, I think
he got his family back. What an arc that he got some family.
Yeah, a happy Tobias book is hard to come by. Yeah. So we'll take it.
And just what an exciting book in general. I mean, Tobias' storyline was very B-plot in that book, but yeah, just a good book in general.
So, right, and it is pushing the series towards the end, and we are going to review book 50, The Ultimate, which, as we said, is the last Cassie. Can I go ahead and read the back really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Really big trouble is an understatement these days. The war between the Yeerks and the Animorphs is full on, and it's definitely going to get worse. But Cassie, the other Animorphs, and Axe have a lot more going on than just trying to stay alive. Now they've got to actively protect their families and the Free Hork-Bajir. And they no longer believe they can do it alone. The Yeerks are just too powerful. So Cassie and the others have to ask themselves a very important question. Is it time to increase their numbers? They all remember too well what happened with David, the Animorph gone bad. But this time, do they really have a choice? And it tells you that it's going to be another serious step forward in the series in terms of changing up the continuity and extending the cast more, right? Potentially.
Yeah. Getting into the front of the cover, I want to start with the blurb. Now there are no more secrets. I mean, kind of. I mean, I think there's a few little secrets that especially talking about this book
there's
specifically.
Still some secrets.
There's some secrets. They still don't know how many of them are Andalites, and then you have the whole new auxiliary Animorphs, which is a pretty big secret. And you gotta think of the Chi and stuff. The Yeerks have no idea that there's an ancient race of robot dogs helping them out. That's a pretty big secret.
Yeah, we've still got quite a bit more development with the Yeerk Peace Front. As they're
showing up in little bits. I like that the Yeerk Peace Front is just here's one Hork-Bajir warrior who is part of that front probably.
Well, and another really cool thing that's coming up is the surprise Taxon peace movement as well.
That's the answer. I have read that book. Oh, That is a very
Yeah,
fun book.
a lot of cool things to come. And really quickly, I'm looking at the inside cover, and it's pretty standard, right? It's like the outside of a hospital building with right outside the window. But the thing is, the image that they used for the owl is like from an owl in flight or something. So it really looks like they just photoshopped it right next to the wall, like very unrealistically. Yeah, you should have brought it up on the wiki beforehand, but like it's just an owl photoshopped up against this wall. Like it could be colliding with it. It could be, well, it could be doing any number of things except for hovering competently outside the window to talk to people.
No, it's better.
So,
it's even better. The front of the cover is kind of cool looking, though. I mean, it's standard Animorph morphine, but the back is like this kind of cool, like tie-dye.
I like the color variation, actually.
It's neat, and I like the letters. The letter coloring is cool. The purple. Yeah,
it's an attractive book.
It is. And I like that the actress playing Cassie, she looks a little older. She doesn't look as young. So towards the end of the series, that's cool to have.
Totally. This actually reminds me, this is a great time to bring up the fact we forgot to mention our Patreon right off the bat.
I was gonna lead into that because I thought we could talk about the cover, which we just kind of did. Lead into the Patreon, and then we'll
thought about that.
We will stop for a tasteful ad break before we jump into the actual book.
Hey, that sounds great to me.
New Thoughtspeak format, 5 episodes till the end. Let's do this.
I love changing the format on the fly.
Yeah.
And, survive, improvise, adapt, overcome, all that stuff.
Yep. That's the Animorph way.
Anyway, can I get into thanking our patrons real quick? Because we've got some new additions that I just want to thank Andrew, our buddy, Ben Freeman, Nicholas Guy, and our newcomer, Jacqueline Fisher. Thank y'all. Really, this Patreon is only going to be active for a couple more months as we finish out the show here, and having your guys' support towards the end of the life cycle really helps us stay on track to finish this out in a timely manner for all of you.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
we're
saw...
releasing... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we saw, these new patrons jump in there, and we were like, oh, wow, okay, well, it's only been a week since we released the last episode, but let's go ahead and record again. So if you don't think the Patreon works for keeping us in line, it absolutely does.
Yeah, 100%. And we're also trying to roll out some last minute just to make the Patreon a little bit more worth your while. You might have seen on our Facebook page, we posted a private Thoughtspeak, return to that side podcast. It's a lot of fun. It's like a whole separate side show, and it's going to kind of set you up for hopefully what we're going to be launching post Thoughtspeak. So lots of exciting things to come.
Yeah, so thanks for doing that. Before we talk about the book, let's jump into a quick little ad break, which, again, also really helps the show. Thanks, Coleman. That was a really interesting product you displayed there and talked about. Now, let's get back into Book 50, The Ultimate.
Hey, we're back. And did you want to discuss some theories as to why this book is called The Ultimate, or is that something to save for the end?
No,
I was a little puzzled too.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think specifically is the ultimate call out in this specific book?
Well, I thought it might have been referring to the ultimate sacrifice, perhaps, regarding like Jake and his choice towards the end and Cassie's choice towards the end as well. But I need to develop that theory a little bit more.
If I were going to extend this title, I would call it The Ultimate Mistake. Possibly, and that could refer to a couple things. It could be a huge mistake to give other people the morphine power, as we've seen in the past. It could be a huge mistake what happens at the end with Cassie, which I don't think we're really spoiling anything for anyone if you're this far into our Thoughtspeak Animorphs podcast. But yeah, I mean, I think there are a few things that could relate to that.
I like where you're going with that mistake thing. I would also say that sacrifice might apply to the auxiliary Animorphs to come,
Oh yeah, I mean, they make, especially the ones who are healed, they're making a pretty big sacrifice. So I mean, it's really interesting that, I mean, this is the ultimate Cassie book, the last one for her. So I don't think that's what it's referring to, but I think it was probably just the title of the marketing team was like, we need something after the penultimate? No, ultimate. Yeah, let's do that one.
It could have been a case of, maybe we just didn't have the best idea for a more descriptive title for this one. Whatever the plot actually starts us out right after the events of the previous book. It was kind of a hopeful note for Tobias, but kind of a downer for everybody else, especially Jake. And starting this one out, they're just trying to figure out how they're going to defend their new post. They're running training drills in the Hork-Bajir, and it's not going super. Well, they have some tactics that they're trying to employ now.
Well, I love the start of this where the combat drill, it kind of does the thing where it tries to fool you into thinking that something's wrong and we're in an emergency, but really it's them running a drill with the Hork-Bajir. And man, the parents, this is what we expected. We knew this was coming, but I had read the last 3 books in the series, so I missed the whole part with their parents joining them at first and not getting along with each other and really
it's pretty necessary.
Run out of camp. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty good drama for the Animorphs book in that, their parents aren't going to take a bunch of orders from kids. And the whole beginning of this book and going into the main plot is kind of about Jake. He's been leading the Animorphs this whole time. Is he going to step up and be a leader of, everyone, of humans? And that starts with their parents in this book.
Oh yeah, that's a wonder. Jake's leadership has been tested so hard to this. There are still hurdles to climb with that because his team trusts him and counts on him, but everyone else around him is still sort of on the fence. And like you said, the parents, they're adding so much more complications to it. And Cassie is still trying to come at Jake from a relationship angle. She's really scared of losing the Jake that she knows.
Well, you can tell that's just done now. There's no time to even have these cute little moments where they hold hands and no one's watching. Jake is burnt out from being a leader, from being an Animorph. He's questioning every decision he makes, and she's trying to support him again, as you said, this person who cares about him. But she's also just hey, if he doesn't do this, we're all gonna die. So we just need him to do that. So her kind of pushing him and the whole calling the meeting and not telling him, I don't know if that was the best route to go.
She makes lots of questionable tactical decisions throughout the book. That is for. And real quick, I would love to plug the Facebook page because I did a reading from the book that I think really demonstrates the tension involved with the Animorphs trying to bring their parents onto the actual tactical side of the war, and her really trying to nail that with her. And you should that on our Facebook page. It's fun. Check it out.
Yeah, it turned out really good. But Cassie calls this meeting and kind of forces Jake into the spotlight, and this is when he kind of starts. You can kind of hear him taking charge, and the parents kind of perking up, hey, this 15-year-old, he might have some good ideas. But, it's still just the start of him kind of regaining his confidence.
It helps that he's got good support because Axe clearly vouches for him, and the leader of the Hork-Bajir, they specifically state, and having Eva, I think, the former Visor one, really helps their cause too, because she is able to inform them how much of a threat Visor 3, now Visor, believes Jake to be specifically. So Jake's getting that little spark towards his leadership stuff back, and he's still really focused on, ending these war. But he's not shy anymore about adding to their ranks. He's the one who proposes it, and it totally makes sense at this point.
I wish there would have been a little more discussion about adding Animorphs. They touch on David. I wish they would have been like Rachel really stood up and be no, we're not doing this. And she kind of does, but I don't know. I feel like there could have been a more drama in that scene of this almost got us killed in the past. We should really talk about this. But they do decide to add some more. And this, I think they came to a little quickly. The whole, the only people we can add are disabled kids. They come to that decision really quick. And it's the most logical point to them, which I get. I totally understand the logic of it. I'm just surprised. It's almost like the author was whispering in their ears, hey, what about this? How
inclusion,
fast it comes about.
Inclusivity. Yeah, I get that. But you know what? It does make sense from their point. They need to recruit soldiers, and there's not a whole lot of other groups that they can really trust. It's more of a trust thing. They know that this group is trustworthy because of these circumstances.
Well, if it was for inclusivity, A, that really kind of bites them at the end of the series, and B, I think it's worthwhile solely because of the moral argument it adds to the book. I thought the kind of discussion about if you gave them the power to, should, the most vulnerable in our society still fight to keep that society, even if they're more at risk than we are. They're still fighting for the same rights that we are in a war scenario. And I love that debate. I thought that was a very adult debate for this book.
One thing that they could have brought up in that regard would have been the fact that, this is wartime situation, and so these people are being given this power to fight specifically with. The moral or ethical thing to do would obviously be to use this technology to heal ailments if that's possible, or, get them better actual bodies to change to. But those are ideal situations.
Can I bring up a real world parallel to this right now?
Totally.
Okay, I don't think this is going to be a very political statement or anything, but you look at what's going on. You look like what's going on in Ukraine right now. Which, if I don't know when you're listening to this podcast, but Ukraine is currently being invaded by Russia. It's a very modern war that we're just seeing broadcast over social media, which is crazy.
It's no York invasion. I'll give it that. But it's real.
Exactly.
It's a real thing.
And the fact that you're seeing, a country who, civilians are being targeted. That's the craziest thing, to see just blatant targeting of civilians, tanks targeting cars driving down the street, stuff like that. But parallel to this, it's not up to, they can't just conscript, able-bodied males to fight for the country and that's it. Like, everyone is actually doing their part to fight back an invasion in their actual homes. And I saw a video literally yesterday of like a 75-year-old woman who opened her trunk and just had Molotov cocktails just filling her trunk. And they're all in like Coke bottles and frozen water bottles and stuff. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of cool things. I've seen like a tow truck driver who towed away a tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's war. That's real war, because when they're coming for you, and it's not, no Geneva Convention's going to stop them from doing what they're going to do at this point. The UN is powerless. So yeah, that's what you do in wartime. You take everyone to fight for their right to live.
And they're coming up with some really creative measures for doing so. It's very cool to see modern war play out. As weird as that
very
sounds.
Cool and
I mean,
very
it's
sad. I mean, it's
yeah,
awful.
it's a bad.
It's made me have some pretty rough days where I don't feel like I have the privilege or the right to not click on a video if it shows something horrible, because that's something someone is living through right now.
Yes,
it's pretty rough sometimes, but
it's very, very with Animorphs, oddly enough, because Animorphs is so much about war. It's about social situations, socioeconomical, all that stuff is encapsulated in this. This is why we love this. But it's so cool to see them finally making that decision to expand their numbers. I personally, I think maybe they should have been doing this a long time ago. Waiting for this long in the story is
it's kind of the genius of the writing. I mean, I'll keep patting them on the back because they introduced David, and that shook them. They weren't going to do that again anytime soon, and it's only now when they're fully desperate that they turn to it again. So it makes sense. I mean, even everyone, all their allies, Andalites that they found, everyone's burned them over and over again. So just having anyone join their ranks, they're pretty particular.
It was really nice, actually, for all the earlier books, because they mention, like, they bring up the Vekels again, which is the Andalites with disabilities, or Andalite disability word, and they mention Myrtle from a previous book, and references to David.
Axe was really interesting and characterized in this book in a very different way. Axe was very intolerant throughout this entire book. Basically, the Andalite stance is that if you're disabled, you are not able to contribute to society in any meaningful way. And he was very cold about that, which, again, good for a series being interesting and showing an alien acting like an alien and outside just humanistic morals, but still rough to read, especially when you have kids in the next page who you're like, oh, I like them. Axe is wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. Axe has been just really conflicted with his.
Well, I think we got a lot of ghost written Axe books that made him one of the fun characters, and the Applegates are back in charge now. So this is the end of the series. They are gonna write this character the way they intended, which is this fish out of water alien.
This is like PTSD Axe now.
Mm-hmm, exactly. He's done, and he's been making. He knocked out Jake a few books ago. Like he's making the hard wartime decisions too.
That's right.
But after they decided to actually find a rehabilitation center or a hospital, something that has like long term kids, they wanted to specifically target kids because they think that kids have a better jump into suspension of disbelief and jump into a scenario where they believe that aliens are real and the morphing can happen. It's just they've shown that it works better.
Yeah, and I would say that this book is really like concise and it just flows very. We talked briefly outside of the podcast that I felt it didn't really stick to that formula 3-act structure that a lot of these books fall into, and the closest thing that this book has to a B plot is like this little bit here where they're just trying to go start the mission and they encounter all these difficulties and they end up like fitting in with a group of performers and they're kind of gallivanting about the hospital.
Well, no, I disagree with you on that. I think the B plot is Jake regaining his confidence and leadership abilities. I think that you see that it's not super strong. It's not like every 5 pages you see that come up again, but it does go throughout the entire book, ending with the kind of big thing that happens. So I do think that's the B plot, is Jake stepping up and becoming a leader for everyone, not just the Animorphs.
Okay, I guess I can see your point there. I meant like as this kind of cutaway style, different scenes. Otherwise, everything really flows kind of chronologically from event to event. But once they're inside the hospital and they're kind of mingling, there's some great comedy moments with Marco again, who is...
Well, hold on. I want to point out one thing before we get to the hospital. I have no idea why they landed at the bike shop, they stole these bikes, and then immediately ran into controllers. Like, I know controllers are on the lookout for them, but just a few kids stealing bikes, they instantly get shot at with Dracon beams. Like,
oh yeah,
that made no sense to me. I don't understand that.
I think you're right. It was a super fast overreaction for plot purpose. I think it's just meant to demonstrate that any amount of time that these kids put in public is dangerous, and this could be a potential result. Is like, controllers are so plentiful now that they are all trained to look specifically for these kids' faces.
Can I offer an alternative scene that would have been just as short and been in this part right here?
Yeah, not having them steal bikes and try to bike across town and get chased.
Well, no, they land at this bike shop, okay? And they're like, oh, bike shop. Maybe they'll let us like rent some bikes or something, and then we can go a little more stealthy up there. And so like maybe Cassie goes in and she's talking to the guy saying, hey, can I get like 6 bikes? Here's some money. And then a guy comes out from the back and he just screams. And he's like, there's one controller there who obviously they've had their faces imprinted in them at this point and know who they all are. But just run into a couple normal people and then there's a controller or something like that would have been
sure,
more,
a little less jarring. Yeah.
Yeah, just jumping out of into the alley and be like, hey, those kids, oh, they're the Animorphs.
Frankly, I could have had it with them just flying straight to the hospital and kind of skipping over the getting in there. But the main point is that they're under the disguise of like magic performers, high schoolers, and they're failing to impress the kids. Marco managed to swipe a pigeon, which I think was probably one of the highest points of comedy within the book.
Well, I like the dynamic. Okay, so first off with these kids, this is something that is going to be a thing for me, and I'll bring it up here instead of in the review, because I could have used without the Applegates and this book specifically making me really like these kids. This is something that has now hurt my enjoyment of Animorphs, because I went through blissfully in the past, going straight into book, like 52 or whatever, and then reading to the end of the series. And the auxiliary Animorphs, I didn't read about that, but I guess they have more Animorphs now. Oh, okay, they all died. Big deal. Whatever. That's sad. That's kind of messed up. They wrote that. It's not we're at the end. This is not spoilers barely, but the auxiliary Animorphs being wiped out was always like, oh, it's kind of messed up that they did that. That's weird. Now I know these kids. Now I actually like their personalities. I like what they added. I like the idea of it, how hopeful they are. Like when they had the one kid, you know, they're trying to make this decision on whether they should give them powers or not, and they're trying to tell them like, hey, some of you might be healed, and you need to keep acting paralyzed. Like you need to keep acting what your ailment was. And you have one kid come up and say, yeah, I'll still do this afterwards. Will I make a difference? Like, can I do good from this? I'm no joke. Like I teared up. Like I was like really emotionally impacted by these kids in this book. And so again, this kind of ruined Animorphs for me, and that I didn't care about these kids before, and now I do, and I know what happens to them. Thanks.
They're very, I think, and
they're well-written characters. Yeah.
It's very much a cast that you want to see expanded on. Really, you do.
I would have loved a side series. Yeah.
Especially when Colette is acting flirty with Marco, you're like, oh yeah, fun. And James just seems like, you know, the new leader. They could do so much.
He's got different
the dynamic between him and Jake, right?
Yeah, he's got different issues than Jake though, which makes him interesting. Like he's a different kind of leader, and he's looking out for everybody, but he's kind of been forced in that situation. Like he's been forcibly made empathetic by his situation, like his situation that happened with his parents and being abandoned and all that. Like interesting backstories that they did not have to give these kids, and they did.
Yeah, and it really makes you look forward, I guess, to more interactions between James and Jake and the team.
Well, the few that we're gonna get, yeah, you know.
Totally. But the cool is these characters are awesome, and James accepts, you know, except that he gets to pick his own team. And then we're kind of introduced to like the core cast of auxiliary Animorphs being James, Colette, Timmy, Kelly, and Pedro are kind of the most notable ones. We joked a little bit earlier that the names aren't really going to matter much going forward, if we're being honest, because I don't think these characters get quite the depth we'll hope for or are accustomed to with the other characters in the series. But these are our new Animorphs, and that's exciting.
It's also cool that there's so many of them. They didn't just add, 3 or 4 Animorphs. They added
17.
23. Well, it's 23 total. Is that with the Animorphs? Yeah.
Exactly,
the Animorphs.
yeah.
Okay, so 17 additions. That's, that's a little battalion they got going on now.
Just imagine if the Applegates decided to push Animorphs into like a phase 2 from here, and we did get like 10 more books in the series, and we were able to sprinkle in some of these auxiliary characters in the order to shake things up.
Yeah, it would have been really cool to have
maybe
book
have
perspective.
Rachel still die, right? So she gets replaced by another character. Like, a James book?
Well, yeah, just a James book before the end of the series would have been cool. That would have been really neat. But they go to the garden, which this part, I forgive them for kind of glossing over it. I don't think there's any cool way
to have a surprise
to show
reveal.
them.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I don't think there's a cool way to have them, like, awkwardly get their morphs, as people with handicaps would be doing. They just kind of mention that, like, I don't know how we got out of there alive, with them not being able to like run away from animals and stuff. So
they absolutely could have expanded, you're right, but I think it was in the best interest of the book to keep the plot moving and to keep the emotion and tone consistent.
Yeah. I don't know. Some of the kids got like snakes and I think pretty worthless morphs though.
Yeah, they had some pretty dumb picks. I frankly thought the best idea, or one of the best ideas they could have gone with, is just everybody going wolf. Imagine a pack of 17 wolves.
Oh, but no. The one exception though. I'm a huge David fan. I'm a humongous David fan. Best books in the series to me. I was blown away and again got emotionally impacted when James took the same lion morph David have.
Yep.
And the metaphor there of like, hey, we're gonna give the morphing power back to people, and you have James like basically return that lion to grace instead of being this thing they're afraid of. I thought that was
it redeemed lion morph.
You didn't have to do that, Applegate. You didn't have to make me care that much about this book and these people.
And just
all right?
the line where Cassie mentions, like, Jake had no noticeable reaction to when he found out what James's pick was. He just said, nice pick. Like that.
Yeah,
that was cool. It showed a little bit of character growth for Jake, I think.
Yeah, and it's just, man.
Another thing.
It's really good.
17 elephants. 17 grizzly bears. They could have just really, really went with group tactics, swarm tactics.
Well, no, I think having different morphs though has always benefited the Animorphs. You have different roles for each person in the group. You have Rachel, who plays the tank. You have the wolves, who are like the spellcasters. They can get in and out quick. It makes sense.
They have different stats, sure, but
Yeah.
really, you throw 17 elephants at anything, and it's not going to be a problem for long. Even one of Visor 3, Visor 1's butt pull morphs.
Well, no, because they tried that. Do you remember the beach and them going rhino and elephant? All of them. They had a lot of problems with doing that.
They were far less
a dream scenario.
They were far less experienced back then.
That's true.
So the cool thing is, yes, they do this. They do this process of adding to their numbers and expanding their battle over a couple of days. And then we get a very emotional scene where Cassie's dad gets to come in, and the moral or ethical argument side of things that Cassie used to play.
Yeah. No, that was good.
And
That was really
now
good.
Cassie's no longer the voice of reason necessarily, but she's got a voice of reason that's even farther left of her.
Yeah, she's the voice of reason still, but her line in the sand has moved so many times over the series.
Right.
That, now her dad, who raised her and gave her original moral compass, is maybe who she would have been,
yes,
a few years ago. But now it's not.
It's exactly like the original Cassie from book 1 is what her dad represents now.
And her just flying away from her dad and not even answering him was pretty, whew, that's rough.
Well, she's like, I know what's best now. I'm looking out for the best interest of Jake, right?
But then they go in this other mission. So they're like, hey, we got these 17 new Animorphs. It went super well. Let's find some more kids.
Right. They're still trying to expand. And instead of going to like disabilities, they're like, now we need blind people specifically. So the climax and the end of this book takes at this big battle at a school for the blind, oddly enough. It's like a weird location. And I had a hard time kind of picturing it, but I just imagined a very generic sort of, like office building-y kind of setting.
I kind of pictured like an orphanage with just rows of beds and a bunch of kids in the beds. That's kind of how it described it. Correct me if I'm wrong. This could be something I made up in a fever dream. This girl with the red hair, who the first one they give the morphine power to, she shows up again, doesn't she? At the end of the series?
No, I don't think that they actually recruited her. As I understand it, they show up there and they start talking to this girl, but then before they can like recruit her and more blind kids, that's when the mission goes sour. Tom and the controllers kind of bust in. So
no, I think she gets the morphine power. I could be wrong, but I think she does, and I feel like she shows up at the end of the series. Like they mention her again.
You might be confusing her with Colette, but I didn't write this in my summary, so I don't believe so. And then I also wanted to point out that, yeah, the names for anyone that's added here in this book and later, not the most expanded upon.
So this is a quote from Cassie. Hold on, an ad just popped up. There we go. The blind red-haired girl who had been observed on infrared camera talking to Jake and Rachel had escaped. Before the Yeerks could come back for her, she'd simply walked out of the facility in Rachel Morph.
Oh, okay. So you're right. They did end up giving her the morphing power, and she did get out of there. Mm-hmm. I guess it didn't specify if she's added to the team, but I would assume she is. So we can put that.
No, I think she disappears. I think she just goes into hiding.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
although recruited, here's a note under her Seropedia page. Although recruited to be a member of the auxiliary Animorphs, she never joined the Andalite Yeerk War.
Wow, the one character that got off scot-free, got it easy. She got a Rachel morph.
Oh, hold on.
Love a Rachel morph.
There's more notes here. And I think she's brought up in another book. I think she is. But it says at the end, luckily, Elena was able to exit the school in Rachel Morph before the Yeerks could return to capture her. Unable to return to the school, Elena was then found by the Animorphs and relocated to the Hork-Bajir Valley. So she's there at the end. She just never joins the war.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, good. Glad to have
I bet that happens in like
Elena.
the next book or something, and we're just spoiling ourselves.
It might, to be. So there's a big battle that breaks out here at the School for the Blind, and Tom is conveniently there, and we get a nice showdown between him and... it's a pretty by-the-numbers battle scene, except with the addition of these new kids who are obviously not experienced to combat in any way. And we have... Is it Colette or is it Kelly that gets, like, seriously injured in the fight?
I think it's Colette. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
I think it was Kelly, but who cares about the specifics?
One of the girls.
It's a concept, I guess, that these new kids are entering the fight for the first time, and we get to go through that similar experience of a character getting mortally wounded and like having to just morph out just in time.
Well, you even hear them tell the auxiliary Animorphs, like, you guys aren't ready. We weren't expecting a fight here. Like, stay out. And the auxiliary Animorphs decide to come anyway and come in and fight. And they're very lucky that nobody got even worse hurt or killed in their first big battle. I mean, it's no Yeerk pool invasion like the Animorphs had to deal with, but it's still like, you know, we're dealing with Blue Band Hork-Bajir at this point. Like, they're fighting the elites straight off the bat.
Yeah, and this is a real turning point because they screw up big time, and this is where Tom takes control of the morphing cube. He captures everybody. Cassie's the only one who kind of makes it out and brings the Animorphs in for backup. And they manage to get the morphing cube back from Tom. James gets it, in fact. So MVP, GOAT, whatever you want to call it, he really shows his usefulness here. And
we didn't mention it, but James is one of the ones who was also healed. He was healed by the morphing power, and he still, decides to fight and lead the auxiliary Animorphs.
Yeah, another really good, like, inherent leader trait, just demonstrated right there with that. So excellent, character development. Right off. But Visor 1 shows up to the battle.
As he does.
Real quick. As he tends to do, you're right. And everyone's fighting. Oh, I have it written right here because it's this point in the story where Kelly is the one who almost dies in the battle.
Right.
Aha. Right. I knew she was important in some regard.
Somehow.
But Visor 1 manages to, trap Jake where it looks like he's in a really bad spot. And we get a little hint at a random, like, Hork-Bajir Yeerk freedom fighter is the one that comes to the rescue, which is really cool because it's a hint of what's to come. And it's just, a pretty good twist. It was unexpected.
It's just great. You see the Yeerks. I mean, this is really laying the seeds for whether they can be defeated or not, because even in a random battle, the Yeerks have, breaks in their armor of their, they have the Yeerk Freedom Force. They have forces that they don't even know about working against them. Like, this should have been an easy win for them, and it's not.
So they know when to get away from battle at this point, and they sense a... But Tom still has the morphing cube. He, managed to recover it in the fray.
And I love this scene. This goes back to the Jake book where he was talking about when he almost had to kill Tom before, and when he was talking to his dad and all that, talking about stalking Tom.
Do you remember his dream? He had a dream where he was in Tiger Morph stalking Tom through the jungle.
Yep. So this is coming to fruition, but I love that Jake is really hurt in his morph. This tiger is bleeding out, and he's still talking about it's almost like the tiger instincts are seeping in a little bit, how he's patting his paws and being quiet, and Tom doesn't even know he's really after him, and he's getting ready for the kill. He's gonna get him.
Yes, he's gonna get him. Yeah, you're right. He hadn't demorphed from the bloody battle so far, and Cassie is the only one who is him doing this because, yeah, you're right. They've moved out of the School for the Blind, and I guess they're moving into
they're going through the forest. Yeah, yep.
Which is, again, a very fitting setting for all of this. And Cassie is, like you said, she's put in a position where she's got a choice. It's really, I think, up to the reader, and it will be determined if she made the right one or not. And what she did was end up pouncing on Jake to stop him from going to do whatever he's going to do. It's pretty ambiguous, but it's pretty hinted at that he is ready to do whatever it takes, including taking Tom's life at this point to stop him. So,
I mean, it's the thing that could have easily swung the war in the Yeerks' favor. Like, the Animorphs were already at their wits' end trying to fight back the Yeerks. The Yeerks had numbers, they have technology, they have everything they already needed to beat the Animorphs, and now they also have the morphing technology. And that's 100% Cassie made this choice, which I love that parallel between the idea that the whole book, Cassie's trying to build up Jake to be the leader who makes these hard decisions for the war, and then Cassie takes away the decision from him.
She pushes him. Yeah, you're right. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's the ultimate decision or the ultimate choice that the book is themed around here, because I gotta be honest, I think she made the wrong call. She did this for Jake. She wasn't thinking about the overall war effort.
Well, see, I disagree. She saw Jake as the only way they could win the war. Jake's leadership up to this point had done it. She saw him as the only way. If he had killed his brother, he might have fully had a breakdown. Even if it was for the right reasons, even if it was, they would have probably lost their leader flat out. So,
the psychological ramifications, you're right, would have played a huge role on a huge toll on Jake.
And you could very much, again, spoilers for the last book, but I think it's very much Jake's decisions at the end of the war that win them the war. So lose Jake, might lose the war. That's the decision she's really making. And I think it's really interesting to hear at the end that Cassie, I didn't realize that she lies to everyone. The moralistic Cassie decides to tell everyone, I didn't know that he was going to get away with the morphing cube. I was just trying to stop you from getting killed or stop something else from happening. And she kind of lies to Jake, and she lies to her parents and tells everyone that she didn't know what she was doing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I didn't pick a point, but that's interesting that you mentioned it. So, yeah, I don't see, frankly, why she didn't instead lunge at Tom and just try to disable him so much that he couldn't resist or fight back to them capturing and then starving out the Yeerk, over the course of a couple of days.
I think with Jake and the mindset he was in, it might have turned into a fight between her and Jake, and then Tom gets away anyway. I don't know. I think Jake was in a bad mindset at the end of this book. And so, he was pretty close to the edge already. And this might have been... There's definitely smarter things that could have happened. They could have demorphed and then morphed a bird and tried to follow him, or I don't know.
No, if they had just mangled his legs, I know this sounds bad, but mangle his legs, demorph, and then carry him back to base and then starve him out. Or try to make some kind of deal with the Yeerk. Maybe, starvation is a horrible, painful death for a Yeerk. Convince him that he can crawl out of Tom's head, and they'll just give him a quick stomping, painful death.
Have they tried to maybe put one of those like computer cleaner air canisters in one ear and blow the Yeerk out the other side? I mean, it's worth trying.
Maybe she has a reverse vacuum attachment that it could use to do something like that.
I'm just saying, or just give if they don't like people with disabilities, maybe just lose those legs. The Yeerk would come right out.
Well, there were, I think, a number of different things that Cassie could have done or might have suggested in this moment, but everything, the way that it with like pressure, and they're still on this high from battle. Yeah, I'm sure it was hard to think straight, but this is what she does, and we've got to spend the last couple books dealing with this change because it's a huge change in the Cassie Jake dynamic going forward. I think
he doesn't trust her anymore.
Yeah, you're exactly right. She tried to, do what was right in her mind for him and ended up, I think, doing the opposite. Right? Yeah. She didn't think that through.
So we have that little scene at the end back at the camp and everything that deals with Cassie kind of lying to everyone and them questioning her and her in her head telling them what her real decisions are, and why she thought that was the right way to go. Let's jump into your review. I want to hear what you're going to give this book.
Yeah, so I'm super on the fence because I, want to have some consistency with our rating scale, and I want to try not to just give all of these books that I love so much 5s based on all the nostalgia. That said, it's really hard for me to distinguish this book between a 4 and a. There are a couple of things that I would like expanded on. Yeah, there's always going to be those hashtag I want that book, or, I want that side plot. More development with these characters, more time spent with them. It's just that's not really what this book is about. That's kind of all a setup and a backdrop to what this book is really about, which is Cassie's love as a person, as a leader, and just wanting the best for him and not quite knowing what that is or how to do it. And she sees and she loves kind of falling, and she's so focused on doing what's right for her. But I think the idea of adding more Animorphs to the team is something that could easily be mined for, more stories and earlier in the series and later in the series. It's really excellent that we got that introduction to it now, and I love all those characters. So I think after talking about this, I'm pretty set on my actual, because I think this, like I said, it's a really easy read. I read this book in under 2 mostly in once, and it's just made it such a delight. It really did. And I think this is going to end up being a 5 out of 5 schools for the blind for me.
Okay. I'm trying not to think about future ratings or ratings we've given in the past. I'm trying to take these as they come. And if these Indian books all rate super high, then that's the quality the end of the series is putting out there. For this book, I feel like this read different than almost every other Animorph book we've gotten. Obviously, we're in the end. Obviously, we're dealing with exciting plot points that are leading us to the end of the war, and we know a lot of what's coming. Obviously, it's being flavored by all of that. But I don't think we've gotten a book like this that has such emotional stakes and the kind of characters who are really being introduced at the last minute, but setting themselves up as real characters, the characters you care about after just meeting them very quickly. And the excitement of the beginning of the Animorphs and being turned into an Animorph to begin with and getting your first morphs and fighting your first fight, you get all of that in this book, on top of these moral and philosophical arguments that we've never seen in an Animorphs book before. I mean, Animorphs touches on those kind of things all the time, but we've never seen it to this degree and so well logically fought from multiple sides. Like this is probably the most interesting Animorphs book from that perspective. And on top of that, I mean, this is an Animorphs book that really hit me emotionally and is really going to take me to the end of the series with really worrying about these kids and they're, and then knowing what's going to happen to them. It's awful, but it's making it more real for me. So, again, not thinking about any other books or giving too many good ratings. I can't not give this 5 out of 5 fake skiing accidents. So that's my rating.
Okay, lovely, and I love that reference as well. One of the characters' backstory. Cool. Well, I really would recommend, like, if you wanted to just do the end series books, this is probably a really good starting point for that.
No, I disagree with that completely. You got to start like 2 books ago.
No, forget even the Tobias one that I enjoyed. Not super necessary to the overall.
No, I think Tobias is the much better starting for the end, because that's when they tell their parents. That's when they come out.
Yes.
And come out to the Yeerks. That's why that one's important.
That actually reminds detail that I could mention. The backs of the books always have the we can't tell you who we are or where we live, it's too risky. That blurb, that is still the same up until this book. However, the next book that we are reviewing is Animorphs number 51, The Absolute. And that is the book in which the new blurbs take over. We'll read it then. However, I think it's worth pointing out that, like you said, I think the new blurbs should have started a book ago on the Tobias ones.
Yeah. So I do want to point out one other thing that I meant to put in my review, but I'll talk about here real quick.
Go for it.
We on Thoughtspeak have been pretty hard on Cassie as a character.
No.
No. If you've been listening from the beginning, and if you are a recent listener who just binged all our episodes, which I know there's a few of you, we go pretty hard on Cassie at the beginning of this podcast, and because a lot of her books are really rough. But when you get to 19, when you get to the sickness, that's when the Cassie books start turning around. And for me, who again really lambasted Cassie at the beginning of this podcast, what an amazing book to end on for her books. Like, she herself has become a much more interesting character. She's not just this moral statement, that this conscience for the team. She herself is now grounding the team and probably keeping them sane. So Cassie, I apologize for what I've done.
Okay, I will say that Cassie really did become one of my favorite characters, most surprisingly. And she has always been one of the most surprising and resourceful characters. I especially liked her solo trip to the Yerk Pool adventure back in The Sickness. And it was a really cool callback in this book where during that brief moment where the whole team's been captured and she's going to get the auxiliary, and she's thinking about all of her options, and she's like considering that maybe they've already been taken to the Yerk Pool and she's going to have to lead another assault on the Yerk Pool with a brand new team. And that could have been an entirely interesting
I want to read that book.
Exactly, right? It was hinted at, and it didn't happen. But Cassie is really probably one of my top 4, maybe 3 characters, really.
It's a pretty small pool to have a top 4.
There's at least 6, so, okay. Main characters, that
no,
is.
I don't think I've ever tried to rank the Animorphs characters, so maybe we should do that at the end of the series.
I would love to do that at the end, have a little fun. The next book that we're reading, like I said, is The Absolute, and it is the last Marco book. And I remember really, really enjoying this one as well. I gotta stop saying that. It's redundant. We're gonna have a lot of fun discussing that one as well.
I think either this one or the one after this one is the last book I didn't read.
The last
I read
Axe book?
Everything. No, the last book in general that I hadn't read before.
Have you read them all now, though?
No. I started this podcast saying I have not read this entire series. So, I mean, this book, the Tobias book before it, I've never read those books.
Okay. So that's really good to know. And the next one, The Absolute, is going to be a first time for you or not?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm waiting every single book for them to blow up the town.
Oh, God.
I know that happens. I just don't know when it happens.
Okay, well, that's amazing, and it will give us a lot more incentive to put these things out. We have it scheduled so that we're going to be done with this by this summer, and, we're really looking forward to your support as we wrap up this series, and we're so excited. Yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, well, I just want to really give a shout out real quick again to our patrons, and if you want to help out the show, you can do that at patreon.com/Thoughtspeakcast. And we never want to ask that you give money or support us financially if that's something that you can't do. We never want anyone to hurt themselves financially to help our little Animorphs podcast. But another way to help out the show is to leave a review. Whatever cast player you listen to podcasts on, leave us a review. Let us know your thoughts on the reboot of this podcast, and that really helps out word of mouth as we get to the end of the books. So we appreciate all your support just in general, though.
Heck yeah! Thank you so much for listening. I've been your host, Michelle.
And I've been Coleman.
And we will see y'all next time.